Hey beautiful, I hope you are taking care of yourself. Today, you and Queen Zany are going to discuss Hiyuki Best Build Guide. So let's start with her kit explanation. Hiyuki is a 5-star glacial character who uses a sword, and honestly, the easiest way to understand her is this. She basically has 2 forms, and her entire gameplay is about smoothly switching between them and building up power before dropping a huge finisher. So when you first start playing her, she's in her present self, which is her normal state. Here, she feels like a standard DPS. You're doing basic attacks, using her skill, and slowly building up a bar called dedication. The important thing is that her 3rd basic attack and her skill give a lot of dedication, so you're kind of looping those to fill it quickly. Once that bar is full, you unlock a special attack called Frost Splinter, and after using that, you can activate Foreclaiming Inward Vision, which is what switches her into her 2nd form. Now this is where her real gameplay begins. She enters Foreclaimed Self, and everything becomes faster and stronger. Her attacks now count as heavy burst-type damage, and instead of dedication, you're managing a new resource called Frost Heart, which you build just by attacking. Once you have enough Frost Heart, you can enter AI Stance, and this is basically her core mechanic. She does these quick slash attacks called AI, and they're not just for damage. They also let her ignore incoming attacks for a moment, so if you time them right, you can stay aggressive without getting interrupted. Every time you use EI, you start building stacks of Whiteout Bitter Frost. When you reach enough stacks, you can convert them into a stronger attack, which gives you Snow-Forged Blade stacks. And this is the part you really want to focus on. Snow-Forged Blade is what powers up her final move. So the whole flow starts to feel like a rhythm. You transform, spam EI, build stacks, convert them, and prepare for your finisher. That finisher is Foreclaiming Blade Liberation, her main nuke. The more Snow-Forged Blade stacks you consume when using it, the more damage it does. You can even hold it to charge and consume stacks gradually for a stronger hit. After using it, she goes back to her normal form and the cycle repeats. Now, there are a couple of important things happening in the background that make her even stronger. One is the Glacio Chafe and Glacio Bite system. Basically, attacks apply stacks on enemies, and Hiyuki converts those stacks into extra damage. When enough stacks are consumed, she can trigger additional effects like Frostbind, which boosts her overall output. So even outside her big nuke, she's constantly dealing extra damage through these stack interactions. Another important part is her team synergy. When teammates help apply these Glacio-related effects, Hiyuki gains buffs like increased crit damage and extra bonus hits. So she's not just strong on her own, she scales really well with the right team. Also, a really underrated thing, her transformation into Foreclaimed Self doesn't cost energy, which makes her rotation super consistent. You're not waiting around for energy, you're always able to get into her strong mode as long as you play properly. And lastly, when she leaves the field, she actually buffs your team's Glacio damage, so she still provides value even when swapped out. So if you look at her as a whole, Hiyuki is a very flow-based character. You start calm, build up power in her 1st form, then switch into her 2nd form where you chain precise attacks, stack buffs, and finally release everything in one massive hit. Understanding her kit is not a big deal, but how to upgrade her skills is really important. With so many mechanics and names flying around, it's honestly very easy to get confused about what actually matters and what doesn't. So let's simplify it in the same way we did with her kit. First, her Forte Circuit. This is easily the most important thing in her entire kit. It controls how fast you generate dedication in her 1st form, how smoothly you build Frost Heart in her 2nd form, and how efficiently you can do your II combos and stack everything. Basically, if this is weak, her whole gameplay feels slow and clunky. Then comes her resonance liberation, and this is where her actual big damage comes from. Both her transformation, inward vision, and especially her finisher, blade liberation, scale from this. Since her entire gameplay is about building up to that final nuke, upgrading this directly boosts her biggest damage moment. So this is also top priority, right alongside Forte. After that, her basic attacks. Normally, on some characters, you might ignore these a bit, but not on Hiyuki. You're constantly using basics in both forms. First, to build dedication, and then in her second form to generate Frost Heart and chain into EI. So a big portion of her total damage over time comes from these. That's why this sits just below the top, but still very important. Next is her resonance skill. This one helps your rotation feel smooth because it boosts your basic attack stage 3 and gives you dedication faster. It's useful and you'll use it often, but it's not where your main damage comes from. Think of it more like a support tool for your combo, rather than a damage source. And finally, her intro skill. This one is honestly the least important. It does a bit of damage and gives some dedication, but compared to everything else in her kit, it barely affects her overall performance. Now, let's talk about her resonance chains. We'll only talk about her important resonance chains. The first important one is S2. This is easily her best value upgrade, and the point where most players should stop. The reason is simple. It directly buffs her EI damage, and EI is something you're constantly using in her second form. So instead of a situational boost, this is affecting a huge portion of her rotation. But what really makes S2 so good is how it fixes her flow. It gives you resources like Snow Forged Blade and Frost Heart when you're off field, which means when you swap back in, you're already close to full power. The second one worth talking about is S6. This is her true endgame spike. It massively increases the crit damage of her transformation and her final nuke, which are already her strongest parts, so her burst damage just goes through the roof. And it doesn't stop there. It also upgrades her passive so that even your teammates can trigger her extra Glacio damage effects. That means her scaling with team synergy becomes insane. When it comes to Hiyuki's echo sets, there's really only one set you should care about, and everything else is just a temporary option. The best set for her is Wishes of Quiet Snowfall, and it fits her kit almost perfectly. The reason is simple. Hiyuki's damage is heavily tied to her resonance liberation, especially in her second form where most of her attacks are treated like liberation damage, so any set that buffs that type of damage is automatically very valuable for her. This set gives her Glacio damage, which is already good, but the real power comes from its snowfall effect. When you apply her Glacio stacks, which she does constantly, it activates a buff, and once you deal resonance liberation damage, you get a big crit rate boost, 25%. Now, if you don't have that set yet, then you can use Freezing Frost as a temporary option. Okay, now let's talk about her main echo stats and substats. First, let's talk about her main stats. For your 4-cost Echo, you want crit rate or crit damage. Since her entire gameplay leads into a big burst window, crit matters a lot. Now, here's the important part. Because her best set already gives a big crit rate boost during her combo, you'll often lean more toward crit damage here if your overall crit rate is already decent. But if your crit is low, go crit rate first. For your 3-cost Echoes, you need Glacio damage bonus. For your 1-cost Echoes, attack percentage. Now for the substats, this is where you fine-tune her damage. Your top priority is always crit rate and crit damage. After that comes attack percentage. Then you have resonance liberation damage bonus. This is actually pretty nice on her because a lot of her second form damage counts as liberation damage. And lastly, flat ATK.
it helps a bit, but compared to everything else, it's the least impactful.
Alright, this is the last piece. And honestly, once you understand her teams, everything about Hiyuki just clicks. Let's start with her best overall team, Hiyuki, Lene, and Chisa. This team just covers everything she needs. Lene acts as a strong buffer, boosting things like damage and helping amplify Hiyuki's burst window. Then, Chisa is really important because she applies Havoc Bane, which helps Hiyuki build her Snow Rust stacks faster. And those stacks give her crit damage and extra damage effects, so this is a big deal. There's a slight variation of this team with Hiyuki, Lene, and Mornye.
This one drops Chisa, so you lose some stack generation, but instead you gain more raw buffs and consistency. It's a bit simpler to play and still very strong, especially if you don't want to rely on stacking mechanics too much. Now, if you want a more Glacio-focused team, you go with Hiyuki, Jeji, and Chisa. Here, Jeji boosts Glacio damage, which directly benefits everything Hiyuki does. Combine that with Chisa again helping with Snow Rust stacks, and you get a team that's very focused on amplifying her elemental damage output. Then there's a more burst-focused setup, Hiyuki, Changli, and Shorekeeper. And finally, a more accessible option, Hiyuki, Sanhua, and Verena. This is your F2P friendly team, but honestly, it's still very solid. Also, a bonus tip for you all, there is a chance Lucilla might be a sub-DPS for Hiyuki, so we can expect Hiyuki, Lucilla, and Chisa to be her best future team comp. When it comes to Hiyuki's weapons, this part is actually very straightforward once you remember how she works. First, her best in slot is Frostburn. It gives crit rate, which already helps a lot with consistency, but the real value is in its effect. It boosts attack, increases Glacio damage when applying stacks, and even lets her ignore enemy defense during her liberation damage. And that's huge because her entire combo in second form counts as liberation damage. On top of that, it also boosts her Glacio chafe-related damage, which ties directly into her stack system. Now for alternatives. The strongest general option is Blazing Brilliance, along with Emerald of Genesis and Red Spring. For 4-star options, the best one is Feather Edge and Fables of Wisdom. Now, let's talk about her Ascension materials, because this is what you'll actually need to level her up. To ascend Hiyuki, you're mainly farming Red Bell, Our Choice, and Exo Swarm core materials. These mostly come from enemies and echoes in Lahai Roy, along with the usual shell credits. For her Forte upgrades, it's a bit different. You'll need Wing Polarizer materials, which you get from forgery challenges in Lahai Roy. And on top of that, there's also a material from a weekly boss introduced in version 3.3. So that's something you'll want to keep doing every week if you're serious about maxing her out. So that's pretty much everything about Hiyuki, from her kit to builds to teams. Everything you need to actually understand and use her properly. And hey, if you've stayed till the end, you're a legend.